What's up, guys? And today we're going to talk about a rib flare. So the main topics we're going to cover are what it is, why it matters, how it happens, the infrasternal angle and the diaphragm's effect on the rib flare, and lastly, we're going to give you a bunch of exercises that should help you out. So we're going to dive right into it. What is a rib flare? So by definition, a rib flare is when these lower ribs here either poke forward, out to the sides, laterally, or one side is flared out while the other side is down, or some combination of the two. So why does this really even matter? One reason people may want to quote unquote fix this is because it may be a little bit aesthetically displeasing in some senses. So say you go to the beach and you lay down on one of the chairs and your ribs are popping out, getting super wide, and that can be something you just don't like. So people want to solve this from an aesthetic point of view, but we can also look at it from a biomechanic standpoint, in which this rib flare usually comes along with a anterior pelvic tilt or excessive extension through our back, as well as this mid-back portion right through here. And what that really indicates is that our center of gravity is going forward, that we're biased toward the ball of the feet. And with that can have its own slew of issues. Another point to add is that with a rib flare, the diaphragm is in a suboptimal position. So the ribs flare out in order to really utilize that diaphragm, but it's not necessarily doing its job. So we get this suboptimal pressurization where everything's sort of forward and our diaphragm is pushing flat and forward versus staying in this stacked position where our diaphragm and pelvic floor stay over top of each other, or a zone of apposition, and everything works as sort of a piston, if you would. Anecdotally, I'll see that with this excessive extension through the back and the potential to have the rib flare or the anterior pelvic tilt, I just see low back pain with that a lot of times. It's sort of a chicken or the egg situation. Did this positioning cause low back pain, or are they in this position because of their low back pain? Hard to say, but we deal with what we get. So with a rib flare, it's hard not to talk about the infrasternal angle. And that is an angle that starts here at the xiphoid process. And then it's the angle in which we take that goes down at these ribs. Now, there's two different presentations. A wide infrasternal angle is this angle that is greater than about 110 degrees. And with that, they are more biased toward this lateral rib flare in which the diaphragm is very flat. Now, for a narrow infrasternal angle, they are going to have a infrasternal angle typically less than 110 degrees, but it a lot of the times is a lot smaller. With the narrow infrasternal angle, you'll be biased more toward the rib flare that is more anterior or forward. And the position of the diaphragm will be flat, or in many instances, it will actually fall down slightly and go down toward the pelvic floor, which will cause this, what could be more of a sway back posture, or that belly pooching out down here at the bottom. So when it comes to measuring this infrasternal angle, what you can do is just take your thumbs or your pinkies, find that xiphoid, don't press on it too much, but you just want to be slightly underneath it, cup the ribs here, and then you'll be able to see the angle that you're at. I do suggest doing this laying down. It's a little bit easier to find the measurement. But that said, if you have a rib flare, you're probably not going to get the best measurement. So going back to the idea that the diaphragm with a rib flare, whether you're wide or you're narrow, the diaphragm isn't working as effectively as it could. The rib flare will act as a compensation in order to try to reposition the diaphragm so it can get some leverage and create that piston effect or that pressurization within the rib cage and the thorax in general. So the goal isn't just to smash everything together necessarily. It's more so to get this infrasternal angle to become dynamic. Whether you're wide or you're narrow, this needs to be able to move. When you inhale, it goes wider. When you exhale, it should narrow. If that's not occurring with normal breathing mechanics, then we may see that compensation of the rib flare. So if we had to pick on some muscle groups that may be causing this, it would probably be our rectus abdominis right through here, this upper portion, and then this
area or transition zone from the thoracic spine, T12, down to the lumbar spine, L1. So these muscles would be our spinal erectors as well as potentially our QLs. You could even throw your lats in there as well. So to get these muscles to calm down, we need to start with an exhalation. So that means being able to get the diaphragm to fully dome and move through its full excursion from T12 all the way up to T8 in the thoracic spine region. So when that occurs, we're going to get the intestines and all of our internal organs to follow suit, follow that diaphragm that's domed all the way up, and the abdominals to then get proper leverage and be able to work as a unit. Think your internal obliques, external obliques, transverse abdominis, a little bit of the rectus abdominis, not just the top portion of the rectus abdominis, but they all sort of work together. Will pull in laterally as well as the rib flare that's more forward or even asymmetrical. We have to get that diaphragm to come up to pull all this in, find leverage that will also have an inhibitory effect, which will relax these back muscles, which are really the muscles that are sort of pushing and holding this diaphragm hostage in this position. So the best advice I can give for when you're in the gym, and even with some of these rehab exercises, is to find that zone of apposition or that stacked position. So what that looks like is just with your exercises, instead of being maybe flared out and extended, we try to gently tuck the pelvis, find our heels, and pull these ribs back, but not together to where we're sort of crunching everything down. That's too far. So just find the stack position, a slight pelvic tilt in relation to what you need, and then the ribs come back, you exhale. And then from there, you can do your activities such as a squat, a lunge, pressing movements, whatever it is that you're doing in the gym. The second thing would be to do unilateral or alternating movements in the gym. So that would be, say, a dumbbell chest press. You're using alternating movements with these dumbbells versus trying to press bilaterally, or you might just do one side at a time while maintaining that stack. That's going to allow these ribs to learn how to come down on one side and the other side come up and create this opposing expansion and compression that should be occurring and allow that diaphragm to work effectively. So now we're going to move into the exercise portion of this video. So stay tuned because we're about to help you fix that rib flare.
So the first exercise we'll be using is an alternating starfish. So you'll want to start by putting a towel underneath your low back. So that way it really just kind of rests and it maintains that natural lordosis that should be occurring. But then put your arms and legs out and make yourself into a big starfish. With that, we'll then cross over and take the opposing hand and foot, reach them toward each other. So you'll exhale everything out, get across to the opposite limb, hold that position, and then you're going to take a silent inhale through the nose. And what this is really going for is it should help to engage what would be the anterior oblique sling from a fascial sense. But really, we're just getting the abdominals to work, which in this circumstance would be the right external oblique and left internal oblique, and then just the opposite when you perform the other side. This will have the effect of pulling one side of the rib cage down or one rib flare down. And on the opposite side, we'll actually get a relaxation of the opposing back muscles. So you're going to knock this out for 3 sets of 10 reps. Really taking your time and making sure you're getting that full exhalation, inhalation with each rep. Again, just as a reminder, it's an exhale on the movement and then an inhale as you pause in that position. It's really going to light up that core. So the next exercise we're going to use is a side plank variation. So you will set up with your hips bent up to 90 degrees and then make sure that elbow is directly underneath the shoulder. So in this case, we're trying to get the ribs to move laterally and find some expansion on the opposing side. So when I shift down toward the floor, getting that right side to expand where the left side is compressing in. And then as I go up toward the ceiling, the opposite will happen. And I'll also sequence some breathing with this. So as I hold it here at the top, I'm inhaling, and then I will come down, exhale everything out, and at the bottom, I inhale. That way I can get both sides of the spectrum when it comes to getting these ribs to move. Now, the setup is pretty simple. You're going to feel a good amount of obliques working with this. Again, try to keep your six pack off. We're not trying to brace, though you probably will feel it with some exhalation. And so you're going to perform 3 sets of 10 reps on both sides, so that way you can get both sides working the way it needs to happen. Now, as a bonus, I decided to add in the actual side plank with this. So your knees are at about a 45-degree angle, and what you'll be doing is essentially pulling all the ribs up toward the ceiling, so that way you almost have an arc at the bottom side of the body. So in this case, it would be my right side. I'm going to hold that position. This is going to compress the underside rib and expand the top side, so we get that opposing expansion and compression. Now, if you happen to know if you are a wide infrasternal angle, you can do this while reaching the top arm up at about 120 degrees. And then if you are a narrow, you can reach forward or down at about a 60-degree angle, and that may add some extra effect. You will perform 3 sets of 5 breaths on both sides. So we're now going to do a wall supported reach, which is the last exercise. You're going to start by squatting against a wall or a door, get down to about 45 degrees of hip flexion, and then I've split this up here into a wide versus a narrow intervention style. So on the left, we have the narrow, which I am reaching low or at about 60 degrees. And you could also probably reach straight forward at about 90 degrees. And then for the wide on the right, we are reaching up at about 120 degrees, or again, you could reach straight forward. The big things to focus on with this exercise is to, 1, keep the weight in the heel of the foot. You don't want to be pushing yourself back like a leg press into the wall or into the door. Think of this as just squatting down with the wall supporting you, not pushing into it. And then you also want to maintain the back nice and flat, but without the six pack over activating in this position. So again, remember, we don't want to crunch. We just want to exhale and pull the ribs back to the wall, not in and together. So one thing you could do is add potentially a towel underneath your low back, especially if you're someone who has a lot of trouble or discomfort with any sort of flexion through that area. So once you have all of your positioning down, you will then exhale everything out. You will pause for 5 seconds at the end of that exhale, and then a slow controlled inhale through the nose without letting your abdominal tension go away. And as a pro tip, as you inhale, you reach your fingertips away from the body or go into a scapular protraction, and that'll create a little bit more expansion and relaxation of those back muscles that are holding you hostage in this rib flare position. You'll then complete 3 sets of 5 breaths of this exercise. So in summary, it doesn't matter if you have a wide or a narrow infrasternal angle. We really just need to create a dynamic infrasternal angle in the first place, which means that the diaphragm is working appropriately and you won't have to use the compensation strategy of flaring your ribs out. Now, if you'd like to know more about this, you can check out my video on the zone of apposition, which is linked right up here.